Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Absolute chaos today. The Max Verstappen to Mercedes rumours went next level last night, with Sky Sports Italia revealing that as far as they are aware, there are concrete negotiations underway between Verstappen and Mercedes about getting this deal done ASAP. This of course arrives on the weekend of the Silverstone Grand Prix, George Russell's home race, and apparently only the Mercedes board were the ones in the way of getting this deal finalised. But today, further rumours have emerged from other sources that say no, that is not quite yet the case. There is no concrete offer from Mercedes towards Verstappen. And actually, there are some rumours that Russell may have got an offer, but actually turned it down because it's too short-term of a deal. Is this true? What's actually going on behind the scenes right now? We're going to do our best to break it all down today. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new, as always. I greatly appreciate it. Thought this is kind of funny, but it's not yet, of course, official by any means. Let's get into things. This is the V car, but racing wheels. I don't know what I'm going to call them that. Let's just go with racing wheels. This is their livery this weekend. They've got like this doodle livery. It's actually kind of cool. There's a couple of ones that we're seeing brought in. We saw the Williams little red, white and blue strip on the front of their car. The nicest one though, let's be real, is the McLaren. They're back at it again with a chrome liveried McLaren here for the British Grand Prix. So, of course, it's actually pretty nice the way that they've done this, looking at some of the chrome liveries of the past. And then, of course, now with the papaya, they have put together this livery for the Grand Prix. So this is what we're going to be seeing on track this weekend. I really like the way the nose is done, actually. I think it's pretty spectacular. I'd like to see the whole car in chrome, let's be honest, but it is what it is, and this is what they're going for. Of course, it's part of their Google Chrome partnership as well, so it all kind of makes a nice bit of sense. Zach Brown's getting his money. It is what it is. That is the car that may well win the Silverstone Grand Prix this weekend. Certainly Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri will be favourites to do so. Hamilton in the Ferrari, as much as you can't count him out around Silverstone, it doesn't look like on recent evidence that's going to be too possible. Can never count out Max Verstappen either, but this could be the car topping the field this upcoming weekends. Let's talk Ferrari real quick before we get to the Max Verstappen drama, because that was mega. Vasseur, as we know, did not have the race day in Austria. Jerome D'Ambrosio took over for him because he stepped away for personal matters. Now, there was a rumour that emerged that he'd suffered a bereavement in the family and that's why he stepped away. But actually, De Keyser says that Vasseur will be on the track leading operations at Silverstone. His absence was due to a private matter. He will say if he wants to, but it was not a bereavement, as some foolish speculation circulating suggested. So yes, that is the clarification from the Formula Uno, now known as Auto Racer side, and Vasseur will be back leading the operations there. This of course is John Alcan. I don't know if he's going to be there this weekend, but apparently Bettadenia Vigna, one of the other top guys, most certainly will be, and there are some interesting discussions still to be had on that. Vasseur says the upgrades we introduced on the SF25 in Spielberg certainly played some part in our good result last Sunday. We want to capitalise on that positive momentum going into this next race. These comments have always been AI generated, haven't they? And it doesn't change. I know that they're written by a PR team, you know what I'm saying. This is Lewis's home race and he'll be particularly keen to do well, buoyed by the amazing support he can always count on here. Personally, I'm looking forward to being back at the racetrack. So, it is what it is. Not much gas coming out of the Ferrari camp. But this is the very interesting thing. Fred Vasseur has been, for a few weeks now, under some serious pressure. There was lots of pressure, Montreal Grand Prix weekend, and even before that, around whether Vasseur's future at the team is particularly stable. At the time, if they wanted to, we know that Charles Leclerc, we know that Lewis Hamilton, even Toto Wolff have come out and said, look, Vasseur's the man for the job, you've just got to give him time. And that is the perspective of most people. I know that some of the things that Vasseur says make me think, I'm not so convinced that this guy is on the top of things as he needs to be, but he also has to deal with the Ferrari politics, which he knew he was going to have to deal with before he came into the team, and he knew very well, Fred Vasseur, that if things started to go poorly, as they have been so far this season, the spotlight, the pressure, the press would turn on him very swiftly indeed. But notably, Ferrari's management, we're talking, Alcan here on the right-hand side, or Benedetta Vigna, they could have come out and said, look, Vasseur is safe. Because there was a rumour actually a few days ago now that Elkan was going to make a statement on it and was going to, let's say, set it right once and for all what the team is doing. Now, we also know that whenever teams say stuff like that, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. The amount of times teams have said, oh no, there is no indication that we would be doing this. I don't know what you guys are talking about. And then about 48 hours later, something big happened. So you can never count on it. But I think the fact that Elkan hasn't said anything, he's not said, no, we're backing Vasseur, Because obviously these reports have done the rounds. The team knows full well when it was initially happening several weeks ago now, Vasseur was coming out publicly and saying, look guys, this pressure from the Italian press is not helping our team, right? There was lots of pressure on it and he was, fighting back a little bit. The team themselves could have also said something to the Italian press to say, look, these reports are not helpful to the future of our team. They're causing some instability and there's no truth to the rumours. We're backing Vasseur as our man. But the thing is, they've not done any of that. And Fred Vasseur doesn't have a contract beyond this year. The fact that Vigna and Elkan haven't said anything, they've not publicly come out to deny any of this stuff, makes, two things are true, or one of two things at least is true. One thing is that, this actually is going to happen, or he's very much at risk. The other option is potentially, according to some rumours, and this is even coming out of AMUS, and that is, those are good sources, suggesting that maybe those rumours were actually initiated by Ferrari's top management, which I mentioned this day one when the rumours broke, because it was just too perfectly timed. There were like 2 or 3 publications that broke the story on Vasseur's, let's say, challenged future at the same time on media day. Like, it couldn't have been more targeted, in my opinion. And well, I don't know. There was a theory that the papers like Corriere and Gazzetta that published it, they already had the story, but there was big drama with the Italian football team or something, so they waited a couple of days, and they just so happened to publish it at the same time. And maybe that's true, but there was theories anyway that this wasn't exactly a coincidence that Corriere and Gazzetta, both big publications, published the same story at the same time. There was a theory that maybe, this was a deliberate move by Ferrari's top brass to put some pressure on Vasseur, and to do so at a particularly key moment. And then Vasseur, of course, came out that weekend and said something to the effect of, we've changed the TPs, we've changed the drivers, and everything, nothing has really changed. There's only one thing we haven't changed, which made some believe that his job is already cooked. That's the Ferrari situation. I'm sure we'll come back to it in due course. Some quick discussion on the W16. Next year's W17, the 2026 Mercedes, that is very much in the pipeline. As Chauvelin says, we're not finished with the W16 yet. There are still developments that are in the pipeline. Obviously, with the reg change coming next year, our focus has shifted, but there's still plenty we can do with this year's car. We're particularly focusing on LE elements that can bring performance this year that would also carry over. So that's particularly interesting that, Mercedes are not giving up on this car just yet. They think there's more performance to come. They think there's more understanding to come as well. And there's maybe some parts that will be relevant for next year's machine as well. So that could be true for other teams in addition. Toto, though, says Red Bull, they're not going to make a particularly big splash with next year's car. And maybe that says rather a lot in terms of what we can expect from Max Verstappen. So this is what happened last night. 10:40 p.m, which by the way was 11:40 p.m. in Italy. Sky Sport F1 Italia, they broke this news, effectively saying Mercedes concrete negotiations with Max Verstappen to potentially soon liberate him before next season. So this is a bombshell, right? This isn't just any old publication saying it. And yes, it is the Italian press, but it is Sky Sports Italia, right? You would think they would have had a conversation. Although I will say, based on what we're going to see in a second, that doesn't seem especially clear that the Sky Sports parties are really aligned on this. But yeah, they came out with this bombshell article, and they did an article on it as well that said the concrete or the negotiation is there and it is concrete. According to our engine team, our Formula 1 team, I guess, Verstappen is close to leaving Red Bull for Mercedes. The negotiation is concrete and in a decisive phase. Below are the details. Max is close to joining Mercedes. Part of the Mercedes board has not yet approved the decisive move. So that's a particularly fascinating statement. It says, firstly, part of the board has, maybe Toto, I don't know what your perspective is there. But it says a few things. It says, first of all, Max is going to leave Red Bull and is going to join Mercedes. At least he wants to do it. It says that some individuals at Mercedes are keen for it to happen. And it says that some yet are not. So that would be the obstacle that was in place. Now, of course, Toto's wanted Max for a long time. Max is the best driver on the grid. Any team would be, let's say, it would be ridiculous to ignore the possibility of signing Max Verstappen. But as I've said for some time, I think that the way that Mercedes tend to think, the way that their culture tends to be, the way that they've built up Russell as their driver of the present and Antonelli as their driver of the future, it would be a big spanner in the works to sign Max. Maybe the very much correct decision, but maybe not. And you've also got to consider what Max's future looks like in Formula One or elsewhere, what the future, let's say what history tells you about Max Verstappen and what happens to teammates in a few years. So there are so many questions. But according to this report, Verstappen would be taking George Russell's seat and Antonelli would stay, which of course would have a big domino effect. Maybe George goes the other way to Red Bull. Maybe he goes to, Aston Martin or something. I mean, who really knows there? But it's a big talking point. But apparently, if Verstappen comes in, according to this report yesterday, it would be for Russell rather than for Antonelli, which still, as tough as it would be on Russell, given that he's been one of the best performing drivers of the season so far and has really maximised at least what he is capable of, getting Max Verstappen in is something that Toto would not be able to potentially turn down, but maybe he could. And according to some rumours, that is what's going to happen, because Sky Sports Italia are not the only people talking about this, and they're certainly not only saying one thing. So, Sky Sports Italia come out with this bombshell article and say that these are concrete negotiations that are in, effectively, the final stages of discussion. Again, it's a bombshell because it comes out on Tuesday night, just a day or so before Media Day, at Silverstone, Russell's home Grand Prix. You couldn't make up some of the timing here in terms of talking through this stuff. Now, I'm sure that Max tomorrow in Media Day is going to say, I don't really care about those rumours. I'm focused on myself. I'm focused on the car. I'm focused on my team, whatever, right? But I will say that Max used to say, when asked these questions, I've got a contract. I've got a contract until 2028. He doesn't say that anymore. All he says is, I determine my own future, because there was talking point that if Mercedes were going to get him, let's say the contract clause doesn't break, as it were, and let's say Max is third in the championship, and therefore there is no clause that comes into effect that allows him to leave. The rumour is that if he's fourth by the summer break, he will be able to leave for free, and Russell could effectively dig his own grave if he overtook Max Verstappen in the championship. That's something that George, I'm not going to lie, should be thinking about right now, because if Mercedes were to get Max and there was no contract clause that allows him to leave, apparently we're talking could be up to £100 million, $100 million to get him out of that deal, because understandably Red Bull would do everything in their power to get every last penny for that move. So then Sky Sports, the main one, right, they come out with their assessment today and they say Max Verstappen is open to leaving Red Bull to join Mercedes for the 2026 season, with talks intensifying ahead of the British Grand Prix, according to Sky in Italy. I'm like, hang on a second, lads, you realise that's also you. I imagine it's quite fractured at Sky. There's so much that's gone on over there over the years. But still, I find it funny that Sky Sports F1 is saying, oh yes, Sky over in Italy, they say this. We don't know. It's like, well, and actually, they deny it, which is just hilarious. So, I don't know what's happened there, because when Sky Sports Italia says it, you think maybe by consequence that this is going to be a Sky Sports News report. And if it's a Sky Sports News report, that's a seriously big deal. That is not something to be trifled with. But a Sky Sports Italia report is slightly different, because then Sky Sports come out with an article, and so this is again on Sky Sports, but Sky Italy say the talks have intensified. But then they go on to describe in their article that Sky Sports News understands that Verstappen has not indicated that he wants to leave Red Bull early, nor has there been an official approach from Mercedes for the reigning F1 world champion. So effectively, Sky are saying that Sky have no idea what they're talking about. And actually, this isn't going to happen, or at least not going to happen yet. And the conversations haven't reached that defining stage. Autosport said the same thing. Nothing has yet been decided with regard to Max's future, despite ongoing discussions with Mercedes and reports in Italy suggesting that a deal is close. Pretty fire graphic, not gonna lie. I think the only man to really trust on this is Max, but also Eric Van Haren, because we know this guy is very close to the Verstappens. When he says something about the Verstappen and the Red Bull camp, it usually goes, because it's usually come from Jos. That's my theory on it anyway. But Eric Van Haren says this: many stories and rumours again surrounding Max Verstappen and Mercedes. The interest from Mercedes is there. So that's critical to know. I mean, and he says that is also known. So yeah, Mercedes are obviously interested. Why would they not be interested? The question is, when are they interested? And we're going to discuss in a second something very interesting with regard to George Russell, which again, may or may not be true, but it was my theory the other day that Toto definitely is looking to sign Max, but maybe feels like now isn't quite the perfect time, and maybe even Max is wondering whether now is the perfect time, because what if he joins Mercedes and they're terrible? And if Mercedes are going to pay 100 million euros or whatever to get him out of that contract, then they're going to want to sign him down on a serious deal. It's not going to be a one-year deal for Max. Like, it's going to be a serious deal, and it might not be in Max's best interest either. He might be better off just, biding his time and seeing what happens in 26 and then making a decision for 27, which might be why George Russell isn't getting the offer that he wants. So, yeah, he says, yes, Mercedes are interested. According to my information, there is no official offer, and Verstappen has therefore not said yes yet. And that's also interesting phrasing anyway, to say that Verstappen has therefore not said yes. Which, you could read that to say that if there was an offer, then Max would say yes. But I think that depends on the situation. And then he goes on to say, factually, nothing has changed since last week. So it's obviously going to be a talking point in media day, as it always is. But this, to me, was maybe even a little more interesting today. Again, coming out of the Italian press. So it is what it is. But there was a rumour that George Russell has been offered a new deal with Mercedes, and it's going to be a 1+1 deal, which, to me, is exactly what I thought the Mercedes would do. Max Verstappen is potentially there. He may not join now. It may not make the most sense for either party now, especially if they've got to pay a load of money to get him out of his contract if he stays third in the championship. That's a good question. But I think, Toto would be wise to leave the door ajar for Max if he wants to join at some point. Russell might be having his best season ever this year, but maybe next year Russell doesn't get on so well with the new era of cars. Who knows what's going to happen? So if I was Toto, I would be offering George a 1+1 year deal. Now, George is not going to be happy with that because he's going to want more long-term security. He's saying, look, I gave everything to this team. Obviously, Mercedes is saying, well, look, we gave everything to you. We helped you get to this point you currently are. Get the 1+1 year deal down. Now, of course, the 1+1, I imagine, might be, as it was with Hamilton. Hamilton had a very similar deal. He also wanted a longer-term deal with Mercedes. They wouldn't give it to him. They only gave him a 1+1 because they wanted to make sure that Kimi would have a seat at some point, and they didn't want to lose him like they lost Max. So, as a result, Mercedes didn't give Hamilton the respect, I guess, that he maybe felt that he deserved, and it was a 1+1 year deal that it could have been broken off by either party, and Hamilton in February said, yeah, I'm going to break off the deal, I'm not going to do the 1 year extension, and I'm going to go to Ferrari. The thing is, Lewis Hamilton's Lewis Hamilton. He could go to Ferrari. George Russell can't just walk into Ferrari. So that's why Russell doesn't have the leverage maybe that Hamilton had, is that Russell can say, oh, look, Toto, no, I want a 2-year deal for sure. Guaranteed 2-year deal. Show that you trust in me or whatever as the team leader. I'm going to bring home the championships. And Toto can be like, well, I don't need to do that. Where are you going to go? You're going to leave Mercedes and go to Aston, go to Red Bull maybe? That ain't going to work out, sunshine. Go to Alpine, good luck with that. So that's the thing. Mercedes have the leverage in this situation because they are the only best opportunity for George. And, he's not necessarily their best option if they could get Max. So this is the rumour anyway, that Mercedes have given George a 1+1 year deal and said, hey, we can make this happen. And if it happens, then presumably they're not going to sign Max. But if Russell is very steadfast and says, look, I want this to be a longer term deal, I'm the man for the job, show that you believe in me over Max, Toto might say, well, actually, I don't know if I do believe in you over Max. So, look, who knows what's actually happening here. But this, I thought, was, even with the Verstappen stuff, this was a pretty key rumour of the day, that they might have given him an offer and Russell has rejected it for the time being. Although, he's got to say yes at some point, hasn't he? Like, if you're George, the idea of saying, okay, let me get the deal signed, at least then it says it's not ideal. Maybe it doesn't lock himself down forever, but it does at least mean that for now, the threat of a Verstappen replacing his job goes away. So, yeah, let's see how this one trends over the next few weeks. I just wanted to quickly mention this because this story was doing the rounds. Effectively, one of the Mercedes top brass saying that, well, Max would look good in silver, wouldn't he? Our job is to work hard and make the best package. The best drivers want to race in the best cars. And I think Max would look great in silver. Now, this is a real quote, but just to mention, this is a quote from the middle of last year, roughly a year ago. So this isn't a brand new quote. Nothing maybe has changed changed all that much. But what has not changed is that as well, Red Bull have a seat free, Mercedes have a seat free. What happens next is on you guys to theorize in the comments below. So very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.